All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for the third quarter 2022 LP update for REFASHIOND Seed. And REFASHIOND Seed is the rolling fund managed by REFASHIOND Ventures. The rolling fund is targeted at accredited individual investors. We manage it on Angel List. And this is we'll talk about what we've done since the fund started in some sense, but the real focus is the activity between July and September of this year. So the brief agenda, we'll talk about our thesis, we'll give a very brief update on our strategy, and then we'll talk about performance. Up till last quarter, we didn't really have performance data because we were waiting on Angel List to provide that information, but now that's available, and so we'll talk about performance. We'll go through a portfolio update. We'll talk about fundraising, and then we'll spend some time on the macro environment. Just before we started the call, Eugene was saying that things are getting a little hectic, and then we'll leave some time open for Q&A at the end. So very briefly, our thesis is a simple one. We like to say that it's designed for the times that we're living in. But fundamentally, we invest in early stage startups that are reinventing global industrial supply chains. And they're doing this through scalable networks, platforms, ecosystems, and information infrastructure. And because we're investors who want to make some money, we prefer that they be defensible through economic moves. We started in 2017. We started by building a community. And the motivation for building the community was that we wanted to hang out with other people who are obsessively enthusiastic about supply chain technology. That community is now about 4,500 members around the world. And between Lisa and I in our extended networks, we have about 40,000 direct contacts. In 2019, at the behest of a global fashion brand, Lisa pulled together a team to start building a company that is working on connecting and orchestrating vertically integrated fashion value chains. They spent roughly, 6 months? Elisa, is that right? Something like 6 months.
Well, we've spent 2.5 years doing R&D with some of the largest factories, mills, fibrous finished goods partners in the US, including Gerber, which has become Lectra, digital printing companies, really building out the playbook and the IP, the business models, and go-to-market strategy for standing up and shoring up our US manufacturing across the board from fibers to finished goods, starting with sustainable and circular textiles. So we're hot on the heels of being the first to deploy the first fully post-consumer waste circular textile product that will be 100% post-consumer waste cotton. So your old clothes turned into new fibers over and over again, up to 10 times before they break down to their sugars and can be fed into the soil. We are working with existing factories that have been in the US for some of them 50, 80, 150 years. And they alone stand very little chance against the enemies at the gate, which we're going to be getting into a little bit later.
Yeah.
But collectively, we've turned them into a virtual guerrilla that can shore up our own defenses and create strength for our own manufacturing here in America.
So the 6 months I was referring to was from the first meeting with the executives at to when
Yeah.
COVID-19 shut things down. It was 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I was referring to. Yeah. So then, starting in 2019, Lisa pulled together a team at the behest of a global fashion brand to work on this concept. And so that has become an operating company, which we believe gives us an advantage over some of the other funds investing in this area.
Not only do we kick the tires, but we found just last night, one of our portfolio companies took the Metro North train ride 45 minutes north from the city to have dinner with me, because we're working to incorporate his platform into our ecosystem. So there's an amazing opportunity, because we're building the future infrastructure for all supply chains that has never frankly existed before. And so building it from the ground up, we can integrate all of our technologies that we're also investing in.
Yeah, and the key to take home there is a lot of the technologies that we invest in, the innovations cut across industries. And so in some situations, it's very helpful if we can say, hey, let's test it out with this group of potential customers in this industry, and that yields insights for our founders to take to other industries. So these two things put together give us an advantage when we are talking to a founder for the first time and trying to figure out if it's an investment we should make. And of course, on the flip side, they are trying to decide if we're an investor they want on their cap table. This gives us a distinct advantage. I said we'd talk about results, and I know Lisa is going to be chuckling because given my my membership of the CFA Institute, the first thing I do is issue disclosures. So one, because the investment horizon for a fund like ours is so long, right? It's at least 10 years. We're only 1 year into our investing activity. You should take these results with a grain of salt. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean that this is going to change over time. So this will change as we gain more data. This only reflects rounds in which there's an equity investment. That means the round was priced as opposed to us investing through a convertible note or a SAFE. We made our first investment in September of 2021. So this reflects the first year of investing activity. And as you can see, even though it's early and this data is incomplete, it looks as if things are heading in the right direction. Now, with a venture fund, the first, let's call it 3 or 4 years, what people in the industry describe as a J curve. And what that means is from the time the fund starts investing and for some time into the life of the fund, you expect that results will be negative. And it's only once the fund starts to realize its investments that things turn around and the results become positive. So as you can see, the total value to paid in is great. The distributor to paid in is 0 because 1 year in, we haven't made any distributions to LPs. So the entire performance of the fund is held in residual value. The IRR is useful because that's a benchmark that makes it easy to compare one fund to another. And the multiple on investment income for now is basically at par. One thing we're going to do, because a lot of the LPs in our fund are making their very first venture investment, we're going to put together a guide on venture fund performance, and we'll distribute that sometime towards the end of this year or early next year. The other information that I think is helpful is, you know, how things are going in terms of fundraising and what the portfolio looks like. So starting in July of 2021 till now, we've raised about $1.5 million of capital that's been committed by LPs. Of that amount, we have closed on $1,134,000. So that's about 71% of the capital that has been committed. And we've invested $712 or so. So of the capital that we've closed, we've invested about 63% of that capital. This is obviously quite far from where we want to be, which is at about $10 million of capital in the rolling fund that we deploy each year. But given where we started, I think it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal progress. When we updated this slide, it was in mid-September. And so we had invested in 22 companies in total, and the 22 companies are what are reflected in the previous slide on performance. Of the portfolio, of that number, 55% were led by women, 45% by men, 27% have Asian CEOs, 14% have Latina CEOs, and the other 14% have Black women as their CEOs. Since this was updated, we have added another 3. So between mid-September and the end of the quarter, we added another 3 companies, which we'll talk about in the details of the portfolio.
I just want to say, oh my God, can we get a little round of applause for how many women, how many amazing female founders we have?
Yeah, it's interesting. So very briefly, Stimulus is doing great. Tiffany has been doing a lot of travel. Autonomy just closed a round that was 36% oversubscribed from the original target. They originally went out to raise $2.5 million and ended up with $3.4 million. We understand that Green Screens is potentially going to be making a big announcement soon. Wait, what just happened? I think I clicked. Yes, we understand that Green Screens is possibly going to be making a big announcement soon. Arkstone, Wilson had dinner with Lisa yesterday. There's a lot going on we can't talk about in public yet, but it's very, very exciting. 2 really, really, really big companies using Arkstone to help them move some manufacturing from Europe to Mexico. ShipDay is growing like a weed and working on raising a round. True to Form is out talking to investors. Synthetics closed some additional capital from Level Up Ventures. Natural fiber welding is scaling and in market with some consumer brands. Just before this update, I got a call from Charisma at Guildform, which almost freaked me out because I was like, wait, it's 30 minutes before the LP update. I need to be getting ready. But she too is doing great. She's going to be traveling to the Black Ambition conference in a few
She's up
days.
for the finalist in the Black Ambition Prize by Pharrell Williams.
She's a finalist. YZ, which is one of the startups we invested in this quarter, is doing well. They're raising a round. BuildStock, we're very excited about the opportunity ahead for BuildStock. Prospective is quietly pulling a team together, and we can't wait till they announce their round. One of the things that excites me about Prospective is that Eric and I are business school classmates, and so I've known him since 2005. I have a lot of respect and trust in his capabilities. OmniChain is gearing up to grow. We can't say a lot about one of the companies. Denim just closed a really big round, $26 million in equity and $100 million in venture debt. And Sawtile is out raising as well.
You skipped over Wisey and Lime Loop.
No, I talked about Wisey.
Oh,
I mentioned Wisey, and I might have skipped Lime Loop. I think Lime Loop is still raising. I need to catch up with Ashley. Yeah. I need to catch up with Ashley.
I want to point out with AeroTracks how amazing our portfolio is. I got a call at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night to my cell phone from David at AeroTracks. I was like, oh, what do you need? What do you need? It's 8 o'clock on a Saturday. He's like, no, I just wanted to call to thank you because we are pulling together our inbound and a matrix visualization of who's been the most helpful in introductions and actual follow through, and Refashioned is by and far the clear winner. And I just want to thank you. So our founders are amazing, and it's a mutual obsession with supply chain that unites us.
That touches on something that I personally have found a bit surprising. And it is that even though in many of the startups we've invested in, actually, I think in all of them, we are, if not the
What's the name of the
smallest.
party store? Where you buy party favors? Sorry.
Oh,
Someone has their mic on. Could you?
Oh, that's me.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Thanks. So even though in every one of the companies we've invested in, we are probably the smallest investor, it looks as if we tend to punch well above our weight. So, they rely on us more for introductions to potential partners, whether it be potential customers or potential investors. They rely on us more for advice to figure out if the way they're looking at things makes sense. And what each one of them is doing is hard. And so sometimes they just need a friendly ear that will listen to them, vent without passing judgment. And so that has been interesting. Now we'll talk about a little more detail about some of the startups we added to the portfolio during the quarter. Because this is a public call, we can't go into all the confidential details. And for LPs in the fund, you should have received a really detailed email with more information that you can refer to. So the first one, unfortunately, because of national security reasons, we can't publicize the name just yet. But this is a company that is working on advanced persistent threat defense for critical infrastructure. And basically what that means is a lot of the cyber attacks these days are ones in which the intruder gains access to a network or system and lays low and gathers data on what's happening in that network. And so this is an innovation, a technology to prevent that from happening. One, to prevent that from happening, and where it happens, to deny the intruders further access and potentially to take offensive measures as well. The prospective company is building a, Lisa, what was the tagline we came up with yesterday?
it's right there in browser, visualization of high frequency streaming data.
It's a visualization for high frequency streaming data. And this is the reason we made the investment, is because as supply chains become more digitally enabled, there's a growing need, first, to analyze data, and then two, to make it easier for people at the front lines of industrial and supply chains to make decisions quickly in real time. And we think a platform like the one that Eric and Andrew at the prospective company are building could be one of a number of tools that is applied in solving those problems. Lime Loop is building a shipping platform, and this platform combines software and hardware. The hardware comes in the form of a reusable package and a tracking sensor. interestingly, the package can be reused up to 200 times. And the sensor monitors and records information about the state of the product that's in the package. The reason something like this is interesting is because companies continue to confront returns. If you're not speaking, could you mute your mic, please? Companies continue to confront a returns problem. So this is, you buy something by e-commerce, it arrives, you try it, you decide it isn't quite what you wanted, and you send it back. And this is the last time this was tracked in a serious way. The estimate is that this amounts to something like $750 billion of lost revenue each year. This isn't in aggregate. Each year, retail companies confront $750 billion of lost revenue due to returns. And so we think a platform like Lime Loop can be part of the solution. Lisa, do you want to talk about Sortile?
Yeah, Sortile. First of all, I need to say, oh my God, I need to update her graphic, because I believe Constanza also has a PhD. We have so many PhDs coming out of the wazoo here. Her whole team is female engineers, Latina. They've built a proprietary data platform around optical fiber extraction. So this optical sensor allows you to extract the exact blends of any fiber by just scanning it under the device. There are a number of large-scale platforms that do this. So the optical sensing hardware for fiber composition is not entirely unique, but what is unique is the data that they're pulling out and then capturing across recycled use cases. So everyone is going to start to recognize that their raw materials are an asset, that it should not just be burned or thrown into a landfill. So you need some way of actually tracking and tracing your fiber assets, so that, for example, when you reclaim them and send them in for regeneration, you get credits. Brands, it all comes down to the ka-ching. If you can start saving money because you're using your same assets over and over again, it's cost savings. And this platform gets around how you can actually track and trace all of your produced garments through the circular life cycle.
Right now, I think they're mostly working with Goodwill. Right?
Yes, they've done a lot of studies with Goodwill, and they have a few other brands in development.
Yeah. BuildStock is next, and BuildStock is building a marketplace for the construction industry. I can't tell you how excited I am about this, because construction is probably, as much as we say that legacy industries need to adopt more technology in their supply chains, I think construction is probably at the very, very back of the line, is way behind everyone else. And so we think this is an exciting opportunity. The team is really strong. Wilson, who is co-founder, who's Catherine's co-founder, is a serial entrepreneur. He's had some huge successes, some big hits, and some failures. And Catherine knows the problem and knows the industry inside out. And so we're really excited about that team. Wisey is developing a machine learning platform to solve the inventory distortion problem in CPG retail. This is a problem that, by some estimates, leads to $1.4 trillion well, in CPG retail, $800 trillion a year of lost revenues, and in retail in general, possibly up to $1.4 trillion worldwide. the innovation they have created makes it such that there is no reason they can't grow in any part of the world, because all you need is a mid-level smartphone or mobile device and their platform. And anyone can be trained to use it in a matter of minutes. So we're really excited about this. They're out doing customer development as well as raising a round right now.
This platform in particular, it's replacing all of the earlier iterations of having giant robots roaming your stores, scanning the shelves and trying to not bump into customers. It's a more efficient, more thought through business model for ease of integration, deployment, maintenance, and lowest cost.
And the robots are that happens in the very, very big companies that have the sophistication to deploy them, right? Most of the industry is still relying on people with clipboards, and paper and pen or pencil. Omnichain Solutions there was an article recently in the Wall Street Journal, I think maybe a week or 2 weeks ago. The title was something like, "Small businesses get tired of waiting and start building their own supply chains." And Omnichain fits right into that trend, or feeds right into that trend. So the idea is, if you're a small or medium-sized business, there isn't a great supply chain management solution that you can rely on. And Omnichain is setting out to solve that problem. Pratik has a lot of experience in the industry. His team has a lot of experience in the industry. The product is ready for prime time. And so with the round that we invested in, the round they just closed, the idea is to go out and grow. And then we doubled down on our previous investment in Autonomy.
Our first investment.
Autonomy is the very first investment we made. It was September the 2nd, 2021 is when it closed. And like I said earlier on, their target was $2.5 million in this tranche. They wound up with $3.4 million. They've come a very long way since we first invested. There are a lot of insurtech investors in this round. And so now that the round has closed, the idea is to go out and start actually selling to logistics companies, to the companies that actually need parametric insurance to protect their cargo.
And to translate for people that don't speak supply chain on the call, AI-driven parametric insurance basically means that they use sophisticated AI to be able to vet and validate any claim real time. And the platform basically is built on the assumption that we're only going to see increasing risks and disruptions across our global supply chains. So every time a plane misses or is delayed and you're held up with your truck, it's costing you money. And people take out insurance on that, against that cost. The insurance companies love it because it pays out generally less and more quickly, reduces their human capital hours, a potentially larger payout, and the customers are happy because they're getting something immediately to help them get through that snafu.
When they announced the round, I was up late one night thinking about how can we better communicate how amazing the innovation they've created is. And when they talk about what they do, they say, you know, we reduce your time to process a claim from 45 days to 45 minutes. And I thought about it and I said, that doesn't actually do what I think it needs to do. And so I did some quick arithmetic. they reduced the time to process a claim from 64,800 minutes to 45 minutes. And that is a 99.9%, it's basically a 100% reduction in how much time it would take. And if you're a large company with a lot of resources and a big balance sheet, this isn't going to matter. But the reason we knew that the team at Autonomy was onto something is because, and I think I've said this in other LP updates, throughout the pandemic in 2020 and early 2021, when we were on Clubhouse hosting rooms with people talking about what they were experiencing, we kept hearing from small business owners who were facing the potential loss of their businesses because of what was happening in supply chains. And for those sorts of businesses, what Parametric is building or has built could be game changing. The number of co-investors that we have invested with continues to increase. It didn't happen in this quarter, but we have a Y Combinator alum in the portfolio. I'm sure Lisa's going to be very excited that Carnegie Mellon, that Carnegie Mellon is a co-investor. Level Up is a co-investor. Level Up is one of the corporate venture funds at Hearst Corporation. Let me see, our friends at Newark Venture Partners are co-investors. Yeah.
We keep some good company. Let's keep it moving. We got so much to get through.
Yeah, there's so much to get through. So like I said, we've raised just a little over $1.5 million so far. 25 startups in the portfolio since Q3 of 2021 till the end of last quarter. We made seven investments over the course of last quarter. We're constantly recruiting new LPs. That's the way rolling funds work. To celebrate having made our 25th investment, we've decided for LPs for whom the $25,000 minimum per year is still out of reach, we'll reduce it to $10K. For 25 people, and then we'll
first come, first served.
Yeah, first come, first served. So if you know anyone who might have an interest in talking to us about that, please let us know. If you're already an LP and could consider increasing your quarterly subscription, one of the beauties of a rolling fund is that is always an option. If you're an LP who is coming to the end of your first 4 quarters of being a subscriber, I urge you to consider extending for another 4 quarters. And as I explain to people who ask why we made it a 4-quarter minimum, again, going back to what the CFA Institute beats into our heads when we're in the program. 1, risk management, 2, diversification. And so if we're making a minimum of 3 investments a quarter and you're subscribed for 4 quarters, then in the first year, we expect that there'll be at least 12 companies in the portfolio. And that's what I consider to be the minimum number of startups that should be in the portfolio. And of course, if you make it 8 and each quarter we're doing a minimum of 3 investments, and that would come out to something like 24.
This quarter was 7. I think this was our biggest.
This was our busiest. Last quarter was our busiest quarter. And at first I thought this quarter would be busier, but there's still November and December. So let's see what happens. We're raising an institutional fund that is about as much as we can say, and we're seeking an anchor or first close LP. We feel that between 2019, when we were talking to some institutions and family offices, and now the evidence to support our thesis is much clearer. There's a portfolio. We've made decisions together as a team, and so we think the prospects are more promising now than they were back then. So now we'll spend some time talking about the macro environment. And something I keep saying on social media is that evidence from other sources over whom we have no influence, with whom we have no relationship, who could not possibly be parroting anything that they've heard from us. The evidence from those sorts of sources tends to back our thesis. So this article published by an author at the Kennedy School at Harvard essentially outlines our thesis from the perspective of a national supply chain strategy, with a lot of the focus or the impetus for the article being the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. China is a growing issue in the way we think about supply chain risk. One, you might have heard in the news that tensions between China and the United States over Taiwan are increasing. And it's interesting that the president said the United States would defend Taiwan if China attacks. What this also means is that big companies and big businesses need to have contingency plans for their activities in China. If hostilities do break out, or if things do get much more tense, what do they do? Do they remain? Do they leave? Do they leave China and relocate to someplace in Asia? Or do they move their supply chains back home? Or do they move them to another part of the world?
The trend since 2020 has been towards reshoring and localization. And I love leading right into this, because of that clawback of infrastructure, every industry that wants to sell into the US market is looking into developing their own infrastructure here in the United States. Because of the constant uncertainty and risk, because we're the largest consumer market outside of China for things like fashion, it really is kind of shocking. Well, not really for someone like me who's been predicting this for a couple of years, but Shein, who's a $100 billion fast fashion company, on average, they produce about 10,000 designs of new product every month, whereas an average fashion brand maybe will do something like 5,000 new designs per year. So their speed to market and the clip that they're outputting new product is insane. And there's been tons of reports on they're paying their workers in China 3 pennies per day, per 3 pennies per item, and having to produce 500 items a day with 1 day off a month, like just horrible all around. On top of it, their textiles have been intercepted and tested, and they contain things like lead and toxic materials that should never touch human flesh. So they're lobbying up and looking to create logistics infrastructure here in the US to start. And eventually, I believe the certainty is that they're going to want to try to build their infrastructure for manufacturing here, which would massively impact our local existing factories that have been in business for hundreds of years.
Yeah, I think it's just, if things continue the way they are, it's inevitable that they'll have to do a lot of manufacturing here, or in Mexico or Latin America. And it's more of the same. So businesses, like I said, have to come up with strategies to respond to various scenarios, depending on how things unfold between the United States and China. And this is becoming a topic that think tanks and other experts are chiming in on. And the most surprising thing to me, we added this slide just yesterday because as I was sitting at my desk and preparing for the update, I discovered that the Justice Department was going to hold a press conference, and it turns out that the Justice Department was unsealing an indictment charging some Chinese officials, I think yesterday was 13 in all, with various charges of espionage and sabotage. And on Thursday last week, there was another indictment of other officials. And so the thing that surprised me was, yes, I understand there are geopolitical tensions and there's jockeying and so on and so forth, but to see government officials on TV publicly naming officials of the PRC and the Chinese Communist Party and saying that they had committed these crimes and that the justice system was going to try to ensure that they were held to account. That was highly surprising to me. And it further emphasizes this idea that the geopolitical tensions between the United States and China are only going to increase.
Reshoring. So with the enemies at the gate of companies like Shein, we have been working through Refashioned OS on pretty much exactly the lovely playbook that the National Strategy for Advanced Manufacturing has laid out for us. We see this as national security, job creation, economic stability, and independence from the disruptions like we saw with the PPE crisis. Yep. There are things that we should be producing in the US market. And when it comes to products that every human needs to interact with every day, the two most critical are food and clothing. Not everyone in this country has shelter. Not everyone has banking or pharma. All of these things are critical, but food and clothing we need to produce here in the US. And what's moreover is that the US produces 4 times the textile waste of the rest of the world. We no longer can ship it overseas. They don't want it. So we're sitting on something around 35 billion pounds of textile waste in this country every year that has nowhere to go, that we've been landfilling or incinerating now. But in reality, it can be used as a new input waste stream as raw material. And coupling that as a reinvigoration of a unique value prop for our existing fiber to finished goods factories here in the US, we're breathing new life into them and giving them a defensible moat against the enemies at the gate. Intel and Micron are building chip factories. Thank goodness. Hopefully it's not too little too late and we can get past some of the other hurdles that they're encountering, but it's all systems go on reshoring made in the USA.
This will delve into a little bit more when we talk about some of the books that we're going to recommend, but Micron and Intel are really benefiting and taking advantage of the CHIPS Act. And the CHIPS Act is basically the government's initiative through a $52 billion initiative to start with, investment to start with, to reclaim leadership in the manufacturing of semiconductor computer chips, because in today's world, that is a very critical and strategic competence, and the prospect of losing that to another country is unacceptable. Lisa,
I love this one. Yeah. Big Bets is my favorite because I don't know if those of you that know me, I live in the future. Welcome to my planet. Big bets around AI having massive leaps forward. We brought back in our good friend, Professor Warren Powell's reinforcement learning and stochastic optimization, because literally AI is going from data sets and intelligence or analytics to decisions. And those are very different things. I put in the slide here, Microsoft is looking to invest more in OpenAI. OpenAI, the images on the bottom there, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, there's a company called DALL-E where you can type in describing what you want the AI to generate as art, and it does it. So the image on the left was an AI generated scene, and then the person input add a flamingo. And that's one of the many permutations now with a flamingo in the art, fully rendered to fit in that scene. AI is finally getting useful, and it's, I think, going to be unlocking creativity and speed to market, because we are going to see a cyber-physical combination where I don't think the computer is yet going to be making all the final decisions, but to accelerate creation processes is a massive evolution.
Yeah. Shared platforms. One of the underlying themes of a lot of the issues that the government has been exploring in relation to supply chains is about shared platforms. I forget what it's called. I think it's called SWIFT, but that's the initiative where the government is trying to get companies to share data and to work with ports and logistics providers and whatnot. This obviously became an issue during the pandemic, during the peak of the pandemic, when shipping and trucking log jams were rampant. And so shared platforms are becoming more of a thing, and the technology to enable that sort of sharing of between supply chains and value chains is becoming more valuable. In terms of the portfolio, this obviously is the crux of our investment thesis. But in terms of the portfolio, Omnichain and Denim are two examples.
I want to touch on the 3 types of collaboration. When I first met Brian back in 2016, I had this thesis after a year of study in supply chain on how all businesses, the future of business and the future of supply chains is going to rely on collaborative value chains. We no longer can have adversarial or extractive, exploitative relationships with our vendors, because in times of crisis, you're screwed. So really the 3 types of collaboration, we have a link through to the article that I feature here, but high level is transaction integration. Yeah. That's all your point of sale details, credit and debit notes, invoices, incoming and outgoing payments. Then there's supply chain information sharing. This is production and transportation plans, production forecasts, bill of materials, orders, product details, inventory, et cetera. And then strategic collaboration. This is improving forecast accuracy. If you are trying to do it as a solo company, you are basically spitting in the wind. If you have a full end-to-end vertically integrated visibility, line of sight across your value chain, you have much better forecasting accuracy, increased profitability, resolving critical supply chain events, improving your sales, pricing, et cetera.
And then this, I think, is interesting and will start to play out over the course of next year and beyond. But the International Accounting Standards Board has made the decision that companies will have to report Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions in their financials. And basically what that means is, if it's in your supply chain, you have to find a way to report on it. And what this does then is it's going to increase the likelihood that investors pay much more attention to this. And if investors are paying much more attention to this, then financial regulators are going to start paying much more attention to it. And so that also means that companies are going to need to pay much more attention to it. In terms of a company in the portfolio that could immediately benefit from this, Arcstone is the immediate beneficiary of this. In fact, the last time I had a conversation with Wilson, they're working on a feature or an innovation that would allow their customers to do exactly this kind of reporting.
Yep. We got to go through these books fast, Brian. We got people chomping at the bit to chat. I can feel it.
So we as we were putting this together, we said to ourselves, what can we include that would help our LPs understand what's happening? And so there are 6 books we're going to recommend. 2 of them from 2021. They're fantastic. We've had the authors, Chris Mims and Azim at events that they joined us for in 2021. Arriving Today really focuses on the changes that have taken place in global logistics. The focus is very much on Amazon and how Amazon has forced its competitors to adapt and to embrace technology.
What's nice about that book is that if you don't know anything about supply chain, it really gives you a layman's terms, the path. Like, hi, I'm a USB.
I'm a
going
USB
from
drive.
this factory to here.
Yeah. It's very, very accessible.
Yeah.
The Exponential Age discusses how accelerating improvements in technology make things possible today that perhaps were not possible even 5 years ago, or maybe even 2 years ago. And in combination with the discussion in Arriving Today, it gives you a sense of why we think about our investment thesis in the way that we do, right? It's exactly this idea that there are things that founders and technology startups can accomplish today, that there are problems that they can solve today, which they could not solve even 5 years ago. The 2022 books, we have to be honest, we haven't had a chance to read these yet because all of these were published very recently. In fact, I think some of them have not been published yet. But what we have done is we've listened to podcasts, we've read articles about the books, and so on and so forth. And so we have a very, very good sense what the books discuss. The Chip War is about the competition for dominance in the semiconductor manufacturing industry, which we talked about just before, and how the United States and China are jockeying for influence in that market. Homecoming is by a columnist at the Financial Times. And basically the argument she's making, and I don't agree with it entirely, although I don't know if these are her words, but in some of the articles that I've read about this, they've said, oh, well, Rana says globalization is dead and, you know, everything is going to be reshored. And I'm like, I don't know if I agree that globalization.
Not everything.
I agree that there are certain industries that are being restructured. I don't know if I'd go as far as saying globalization is dead. But that's the essence of the argument that she makes, and she looks at a number of industries in order to make that point. The titanium economy is one that I'm excited about. This has not been published yet, but it comes out soon. I think it comes out later this month. But basically what the titanium economy discusses is everything that is discussed in the manufacturing strategy that the White House published. So it's this idea that manufacturing in the United States is undergoing a renaissance. An argument they make, though, is that a lot of the companies that are part of this renaissance are small companies that no one has heard about. These aren't companies that are in the press very much. And so the argument is, how do you build on that to create a stronger economy? And then this is Nouriel Rubini is a professor at NYU. I'm an NYU alum and an adjunct there. So I chuckle when I talk about it. But mega threats, his nickname is Dr. Doom. And he's called Dr. Doom because he predicted the 2008 financial crisis. And this time he goes through 10 different macro trends that he thinks pose a great risk to the world economy. The way that I think about it, if you group them together, they map directly to the reasons why we thought our investment thesis makes sense when we first met in 2016. There's geopolitics, climate change, and then markets, consumer behavior, and all the things that surround those. So those are the 6 books. Those are the 6 books that we recommend. When I email the video and the presentation, I will include some links to some of the podcasts and some of the articles that are related to those books.
All of the books and everything that we cite in this document are clickable within the PDF.
Within the PDF. The last thing we'll say, and we say this all the time, is that the opportunity is massive, right? We believe that there isn't a bigger investment opportunity than this one. The global economy runs on supply chains. And so however big you think the global economy is, ultimately that's the size of the opportunity. Now, our job is to find the pockets within that immense landscape where venture scale returns are possible, and to make those investments as early as we can. On that note, I will open things up for questions. Unless there's something you wanted to add.
No, I think I'm curious how many of the people that are listening right now are currently tackling some of these difficult problems in their supply chains, and would love to know where you're encountering your biggest hurdles today. And is it the actual crises in your supply chain, or is it a lack of agility within the management structure within your current companies? Because we've seen a lot of legacy siloed infrastructure creating more crises than really should exist, even though everything's compounding these days. Don't make me call on you.
Hi, Lisa. Hi, Brian.
Hi there.
My name's Arun Sankaran, and I was referred to by Mark Hessel, connected with Brian a few days ago.
Yeah. Hi.
Yeah, we haven't got a chance to chat yet, but thank you for inviting me to call. Very interesting. I just wanted to weigh into your question, Lisa. That I founded a company called 202 Group, and we do supply chain risk analytics, mostly for the government, Department of Defense. And so I actually found it kind of interesting, you're weaving in of the macro national security issues. But you know, the big issue we're trying to tackle is these big things that they manufacture, like whether it's aircraft or ships or radars, complex systems. People just don't know who's actually in their supply chain. It really is a transparency problem, and it's not just the first tier or second tier, but getting down to tiers, supply chains that go 7 or 8 or 9 subcontractor tiers deep. So we figured out a way at least to do data, find open source data that kind of illuminates who the suppliers are before we assess them for risk, at least in the defense government space. I assume that's a problem in other industries too, but you know, something I'm working on within my current business, but really interested in.
You should be talking to Wilson the next time Wilson is in town. He literally just got on a plane to go back to Singapore. But Wilson, he'll be back in a few months. I'll introduce you guys to one another. Wilson is a person that you should be talking to. Wilson is CEO and founder of Arcstone. Just very quickly, American citizen, industrial engineering and operations research, decided to found a company in Southeast Asia